Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on Spotify, YouTube, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And visit patreon.com/vmspod or paypal.me/vmspod to make a one-time or recurring donation and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. There are tons of things to update you about, like Saturday's trip up to Storm King Museum and Monday's Yom Kippur mini epiphanies, but this week's one of those big round number episodes, so let's get right to it. Maybe I'll write about all that stuff in the weekly email so you can ignore it there. We are celebrating episode 400 of the Virtual Memories Show this week, and my guest is the legendary entertainment columnist Michael Musto. Now, I started reading Michael's La Dolce Musto column in the Village Voice when I was a teenager in the mid-'80s. And while it had a bunch of references to people and venues I didn't know, he conjured up this whole world with those columns. It's something that seemed pretty magical to a bored kid in the suburbs. I mean, I was 25 miles from New York. It's not like I was 1,000 miles away, but it was still weirdly enchanted to read the bold names, the bylines, all the wacky allusions he came out with. Anyway, as I got older and boring rather than bored, I drifted out of all that stuff. And at the same time, Michael started becoming a TV presence, along with his columns in journalism. And I found that in recent years, I started following his Twitter feed and checking out what he was writing, especially after the Village Voice went under and his byline started showing up elsewhere. And anyway, I linked to a couple of his columns and some of his longer pieces in my weekly email. And one of my listeners, Ed Park, wrote and said, "You should have Musto on the show." And why that never occurred to me, God only knows, because Michael's a legend and a fantastic and fantastically bitchy writer, and just the sort of person I would love to talk to and learn from. So I dropped him a line via Twitter, and here we are. It was a blast to just talk about everything that's changed since he started as a columnist all those years ago in terms of gossip and nightlife and New York and the nature of celebrity and what the Village Voice meant and all the writers that came out of it, and queer life and how that's represented now versus then and more. So, only caveat is I made him cry a little bit, but I got us onto another topic quick. So, there's not too much of that. Anyway, here's Michael's bio, which is supplied by him. I wrote the La Dolce Musto column for the Village Voice. I have written 4 books, including Downtown and Manhattan on the Rocks, and I have long also been a TV commentator on pop culture topics. And that's all you need to know. Now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Michael Musto. I've read a couple of your columns recently that sort of harken back to your coming of age in New York City and what the pandemic means for a sort of upheaval in gay life. And I was wondering, how this whole situation has inspired those sorts of remembrances and sort of ruminations for you. Do you find yourself looking back a lot more at your life and what things mean the longer we've been in isolation, which is all a big way of saying, how's your pandemic going?
Oh, well, it's fantastic. Thank you. No, I don't look back a lot, but it's not that difficult to make the connection between the early days of the AIDS crisis in the early 80s. It was devastating. More and more, we found that we had to take names out of our Rolodex because people were dying, or you would run into someone and realize that they had it, and then you heard their boyfriend had it. And it was a horrifying time because we were filled with so much grief and also terror for ourselves and also rage because President Reagan was botching it. In fact, he wouldn't even mention the subject for quite some time. So here we come years later. It's another disease. It's actually more easily transmissible, but the death rate is much lower than AIDS. So there are parallels and there are differences. But it also has devastated the scene because nightlife is over for the time being, though I think it's going to come back with a boom. And suddenly I find that there's no theater or nightlife to write about, and there's hardly anybody to write about it for anyway. At the same time, we're finding ways to connect. In the early days of AIDS, there was no internet. So we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have email, we didn't have cell phones, and we're not able to text each other. Now we're reaching out for lifelines all the time and getting through this crisis. We found other ways at the time. And also activism has been, another parallel is that activism has been tapped in by both crises. I joined ACT UP in 1987. That was the AIDS activist group that was determined to get the public and the government and the media to notice AIDS. And now it's more about anti-Trump protests or Black Lives Matter protests, but they're partly fueled by the frustrations of the COVID crisis.
Mm-hmm. Is there any sense of, I'm putting it in horrible terms, I would say envy, but a sense that now that, this is a disease that straight people can get, and it's so easily transmissible, like you were saying, and there was no perceived stigma, that, oh, everybody cares about COVID, but, it took us forever to get people to pay attention to AIDS?
I wouldn't say that because, once again, this plague seems to be affecting a lot of blue states and a lot of people of color.
True.
Not exclusively, but once again, the sort of Bible thumpers who blame people for getting diseases can look down on the people who are getting it and think that they are not vulnerable to it.
Yeah, having lived through, I'm in northern New Jersey, so we were second worst hit behind New York City in April and May, and we thought we were laying out a roadmap for everybody in terms of what not to do, but like you were saying, that those other regions of the country seemed to find a reason why we were suffering the way we were suffering.
Yeah, and Trump came right out and said it. If you just take away the numbers from the blue states, we're doing great. Why would the blue state numbers count?
Yeah. Now, can you talk about, again, it's something you've written about somewhat recently, but I'm interested in how you're dealing with it. The changes in fame and celebrity and gossip, which is, your milieu, over the 40 plus years you've been in this field. How has it changed? How's it accelerated? What's gotten weirdest for you, I guess, in terms of sort of covering celebrity culture over the decades?
For me, it started to change with the rise of the internet and eventually with social networks where celebrities can serve their own dish. Mm-hmm. Though to me, that makes it less sensational because they're putting their own spin on it, unless they're drunk when they're tweeting. At the same time was the rise of reality TV, which I find really annoying and which is obviously never going away. But it created a whole different type of 15-minute celebrity. So in the case of Kim Kardashian, it's like 15 years plus, and she's not going anywhere. But I found these kind of disposable fake celebrities a little annoying. I always celebrated 15-minute celebrities, like in the old days, maybe Zsa Zsa Gabor, because they had personality, and she actually did something. She was supposed to be an actress. I don't care about somebody on a scripted reality show having fake confrontations, and why even get to know them because they'll be gone by the next season anyway. But to me, the biggest blow to celebrity gossip has been that Donald Trump is celebrity gossip. He's not any kind of credible leader. He's a reality TV star himself who is treating the government as another reality TV show. He's full of confrontations and lies and evasions and, smearing people. And that gets the headlines. I'm not getting as many calls to go on cable channels to talk about celebrities because they get much better ratings talking about what Donald Trump just said. Oh, can you believe how outrageous it was? As opposed to Meryl Streep or even Johnny Depp or anybody, what they might be up to.
It sort of reminds me, I think it was Chris Hitchens who had said that Washington is Hollywood for ugly people when it comes to that sort of punditry and celebrity. But yeah, it's
and the other thing is celebrities now are just constantly tweeting about how they hate Trump, except for Scott Baio or whatever. So their world is all about Trump, and then the Me Too movement, of course, has captivated people's attention, and that's about Trump too because he has so many suits against him. So all roads lead back to Trump. And in the COVID era, celebrities have become really extra irrelevant, in my opinion, because they can't do what they do. They can't really film or do live performances the way they used to. So all they could do is tweet political stuff or, do these kind of low budget home video benefits, which are all well and good. But it seems like you could live without them, whereas you can't live without the political figures who are wrecking your life. You can live without them, but you can't live without gossiping about them.
Right. What's your post-pandemic thing? Is there a place or outside of, what do you want to do that tells you we're past this whole moment?
Well, I think, first of all, we're going to get Biden and Harris into office. Secondly, in New York, people for years had complained New York had gotten too slick. Starting in the 90s, Mayor Giuliani sold out to tourism and made it all very Disney. The same people complaining about that for years are now complaining that New York is too edgy and too dangerous. I mean, you can't have it both ways. The edge is definitely coming back. The rents are going to go low, low, low. There's going to be an influx of young people. When I go to like Washington Square Park or Tompkins Square Park, there's already a lot of young people, a lot of people from Brooklyn. They're singing and dancing. There's DJ music. New York is not over. It's a whole different mood right now. And a lot of the realness is back. A lot of the rich people who, we have to flee to our country home. Fine, good riddance. We hated you anyway. And I think the new New York after the pandemic is going to be a great place that I'm going to be writing a lot about because it's going to be a youthful energy. There'll be room for nightlife again. Because if somebody wants to open a dance club, they're going to let them. No one's going to stop a business from opening because there are going to be so many empty spaces.
Yeah.
And in the past, it was all about community boards controlling and denying liquor licenses, making sure you couldn't dance. That's why all the nightlife had to move to Brooklyn. It's going to come back to Manhattan. And there's going to be a big music scene, cabaret, theater, everything. I just would like to fast forward to that moment right now. It's getting a little frustrating.
I was reading someone who was talking about, whether you could just take a shovel to the head that would knock you out for 7 weeks, and then you could wake up and see at least post-election where we were. Do you have a favorite era of New York, or is it the Fran Leibowitz thing of whenever you were in your 20s, that's the greatest place ever?
Yeah, I mean, there is something about being young and everything is fresh and new and exciting. In the 70s, I started going to clubs like Studio 54, which really was the ultimate disco. And somehow I got in whenever Steve Rebell, the co-owner, was at the door because he loved press and adored publicity, and he would pull me in. It was dazzling. And then at the same time, there was a downtown club called the Mud Club, which was like the anti-Studio 54. And I loved that because that was all sort of narrow tide posers and punks and filmmakers. And it had a rock energy and an edge to it. The 80s was also a great time for me because I started my Village Voice column in 1984. It was the peak of downtown nightlife at that point. There were gigantic dance clubs that catered to Bohemia. There were also East Village drag bars and performance spaces and art galleries. And that was a boom time. But I'm not one of those Norma Desmond types that's always just looking at the past. I kept all my old press clippings, but I never look at them.
That's a good balance to strike, I guess.
Yeah, it's healthy.
You miss the voice just as as an organ for yourself, or are there other aspects of the voice that also, given how everything has been destroyed in terms of alternative weeklies getting annihilated, is there something unique about the voice that you really pine for?
I miss the Voice the way it was at its peak. And I worked there, had my column for something like 28 and a half years. And then came back as a freelancer, and actually had written before I started my column, had written there. But it was such a great venue for the voices of writers. The name Village Voice was perfect because they gave me my space, which kept growing. It started as a third of a page, became a full page. Then it was a full page plus daily blog. And they really gave me the ball to run with and said, just have fun and romp to the max. And that's what I did. And that's something I've never found anywhere else. But I don't miss the Voice towards the end because I saw the writing on the wall. Obviously, it had been founded as an alternative. But through the years, so many new media had popped up, like cable channels and internet. So it ceased to be an alternative to anything. The liberal point of view was everywhere. And towards the end, the Voice, I think, had trouble deciding on what its reason for existing was. Is it going to be political? Is it going to be a service publication? Is it going to expose you to new talent? But the thing is, with everything at your fingertips, including on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, it was hard to really break stories towards the end or break personalities. Though I really tried. Believe me, I was on that treadmill trying to keep the Voice afloat till the last moment. I'm in the last issue. They revived my column, La Dolce Musto, for the last issue.
Oh, man.
And then it was web only, and I was writing pretty much towards the end.
Yeah. You did have that line. I forget. I've read it probably in your last collection. The beauty of blogs being that they combine urgency with narcissism. And I just don't know how much that, overlaps with your mission, when you're writing columns, which have a little bit more, like you were saying, a sort of datedness, or at least that they're meant to stand as something more than just ephemera. But.
Yeah, well, some people say I was maybe the first blogger, even when I was just in print. It almost read like what blogs ended up reading like. But yeah, there's definitely an element of narcissism because my column was called La Dolce Musto. It was my life. It was my week in New York as told through my eyes. It really was my personal diary. So I injected myself into everything. If I talked to a celebrity, it was about my interaction with that celebrity. And I got made fun of, even in the Village Voice for being so me. But eventually people came around to it, and now everyone is me. Take a look at Facebook. Everyone is telling you that they just made Yankee bean soup or something.
Right. Yeah. Do you remember when you kind of hit on that as a style? I guess in a sense, when did you find your voice as a writer?
Well, when I started in '84 with the column, I was a little nervous because I hadn't found the right tone yet. And then somebody said to me, well, there's no dish in your column. There's no gossip. And somehow I interpreted that to mean I needed to be meaner and angrier. And so then I just started trashing everybody. And the column became too one-note negative. And then eventually I learned to show my appreciative side because I do love celebrities, or I would not devote a life to writing about them. And then I found, I think, a good balance, and I did a pretty decent job of evolving with the times, going through the activism, which I wasn't really assigned to cover. I just would work that into the columns. Mm-hmm. And then through the 90s when things started waning for New York because of Giuliani, and it's, eventually it became about bottle service and boring lounges.
Yeah.
I wrote criticisms of that and tried to constantly stay plugged in to what was happening at the moment, not just coast on my laurels.
Sure. I guess then concurrent with that finding a voice, do you remember the moment you realized you had an audience? The moment you realized that people were actually reading what you were writing?
Well, for years, I wasn't sure. This was before internet. You didn't get emails. People would have to write you letters in the mail. And I did get letters in the mail, which was lovely. But also people didn't necessarily know my face. So when I went out to clubs every night, most people knew who I was in the club scene. But at other events, they didn't necessarily know. So I didn't get the recognition. In '93, I started appearing on The Gossip Show, a show on the E! Channel, where different gossip columnists would just kind of look at the camera and give their dish of the day. And then people started coming up to me on the street a lot and saying, I love your column. Because they put my face together with my byline. So that was gratifying to know I'm not writing in a vacuum. Nowadays, I write something now, obviously, and you get an instant response. People comment, they can send you emails, they comment on Facebook, etc. Back then, you just had to hope it was reaching people.
Well, I was going to say, in addition to the letters, there's also the weird anonymous threatening phone calls that could have been part of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've had it all.
Now, one of the things that struck me when you mentioned New York coming back and young people, being in a vanguard of that, do you imagine or think about what it would be like being young and queer now? Coming up, do you look at your own experience and wonder how that would have translated into 2010s, 2020?
Well, anybody is luckier than me as far as the young queer. No, I shouldn't say that. No, that is not true. I take that back. I'm sorry. I just mean that when I was coming of age as a gay, there was no representation of LGBTQ. There was nothing on TV except occasional portraits of sad, shame-based, lonely people. In movies, gays were either villains or sad, pathetic victims. I remember looking in a textbook in my parents' house and finding out that homosexuality was considered a mental illness. So I was really pretty sad. Now, the reason I took back what I said about luck is that I do have cisgender male white privilege. So it's much worse for someone who doesn't have that. But all I could say is I was totally lost, had no idea what I was going to do about it. Fortunately, I went to Columbia. There was a whole gay community, and eventually I came out. Today's LGBTQs have a much better world in that there's gay representation, there's access, there's information. It's all at your fingertips. Unfortunately, they're coming of age during COVID and during lockdowns. That's pretty devastating. They're also coming of age during a president who's trying to repeal each of Obama and Biden's LGBTQ protections. So for every step forward, there are steps back, and it's always going to be vulnerable to be a young queer. I'm always there for them. If they ever need advice, I'm there to give it. I could have used somebody like me when I was growing up.
Do you find yourself in that role, sort of mentoring, or
I do?
I hesitate to whatever term you'd use because shepherding sounds a little weird in its way. But
I love mentoring and giving advice and giving people encouragement, letting them know it does get better. It's not hopeless. I always say, come to New York. It's a family here, and at least you'll see a good drag show.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does the prevalence of things like RuPaul's drag show on TV have a significant impact on youth in any respect that they see, this is, it's outrageous, but, I'm not the only person who feels this way or looks at the world like this?
Absolutely. I mean, the show has inspired generations of kids. I call them baby drag queens. And I've done the conventions, DragCon. I've done panels there, and I see the baby drag queens. Some of them are straight. A lot of straight girls and women watch the show. But there's also young drag queens, boys that dress as girls, and it totally validates them. Hopefully they don't get bullied at school, but I have a feeling they do. But they could turn to RuPaul as their hero and feel better about themselves.
Yeah. Do you remember first encounter with RuPaul?
Oh, well, we were friends in the old days. And RuPaul had come to New York a few times to perform and then moved to New York with Larry T, a DJ, and Lahoma, another drag queen, in 87. And I was friends with the guy they moved in with, Nelson Sullivan. And RuPaul just took over the scene instantly. Like every club you went to, RuPaul was on stage doing this fabulous hybrid of like Diana Ross and Tina Turner and Cher and Pam Grier.
Yeah.
And there are videos, if you look on YouTube, of me and RuPaul in Atlanta, etc. And RuPaul has a very cerebral, introspective side. One of the videos, he's just kind of sitting there meditating, obviously, and he's not always on 24 hours a day. I think you would explode if you were like that. Even Liza Minnelli has down moments.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say downer moments, but whatever. That's fine.
But basically, RuPaul had that first big chapter in the 90s with the song Supermodel, the talk show on VH1, etc. Then there was an intermittent period where it wasn't certain if RuPaul was like completely washed up. And then came the Drag Race, which was an even bigger chapter. So she's just gigantic at this point.
Yeah, understood. As far as the biggest icon of your career to cover, Madonna, right?
Oh, I guess Madonna and Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean,
Andy,
Warhol. Yeah,
yeah,
go on.
but he died in the 80s. But he was an inspiration because, first of all, in the 70s, some other writer named Bob Weiner had gotten me hooked to have a meeting with Andy Warhol to talk about a possible screenplay. And I was basically fresh out of college and sitting at the factory with Andy Warhol. I didn't even know what was happening. And I pitched a few ideas, and Andy liked it, and nothing came of it. But still, I could dine forever off the fact that I had a business meeting with Andy Warhol. And then in the 80s, I realized even more how major he was, because he was commenting on consumerism and turning it into more consumerism. He was also elevating drag and trans performers as superstars. And when he would walk into a club, you knew you were in the right place. And I can't say we were that close. I love these people who pretend, they were just inseparable with Andy, and they're not even mentioned in his diaries. I mentioned a few times, but basically whenever I needed something, if I needed a blurb for a book or promotion, he was always there for me, and he was a terrific validator. Madonna, I never had the nerve to talk to face to face. In the early 80s, I had a band called The Must, which was a Diana Ross cover band. And Madonna was an up-and-coming singer, and we were equally billed at a club called Chase Park, which was a Chase Bank turned into a nightclub. And she got to sound check first and was so obsessive about it, checking the microphone from every angle, that me and my band just stood there waiting for our turn to sound check, and it never came because the club had to open. She was literally checking that mic for so long. Wow. That they had to open the doors. And then we went on first, and we went to the shared dressing room, and our friends were greeting us and congratulating us. And Madonna's manager at the time, Camille Barbone, said to us, you can't have guests visit. Madonna's getting ready. And that's when I just lost it. I was like, we already couldn't have a sound check, and now you're telling us we can't use the shared dressing room. And Camille backed down. I was proud of myself. But I'm famous for being on every VH1 show saying I knew at that point Madonna was going nowhere. I still say I was right.
Nice. I like the fact that, like, all of the craziness we hear about, the germ phobia and cleaning and scrubbing down the entire dressing room, et cetera, when she was touring, turns out to date all the way back to the 80s. It's nice to have obsessiveness stand up that long. So
I've written, I stole a line from Absolutely Fabulous, and I said, it's funny that Madonna didn't want to change in front of strangers. She ended up making the world her gynecologist. But in any case, I came around to being a huge fan. At first, I thought she was annoying. The first song was horrible, everybody. And I thought, just please go away. And then she hooked me. She elevated the gays. I wrote a cover story for Outweek about how amazing she was. And then later on, I started trashing her again. Before realizing that she has a right to redefine the rules of a maturing woman in the pop music biz. People don't make fun of Mick Jagger for aging, Right. Yeah. So Madonna should be allowed to do the same. I just wish she had more of a sense of humor about herself.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. Now, do you have bridges that you regret you burned when it comes to trashing celebrities? Actually, we'll put it this way. The first time you encountered someone after writing something negative about them that put you really, really in a bad position when you got to see them in person?
It would happen all the time. I mean, I would walk into, I'd be waving at a celebrity I was friends with, quote, friends with, but had written something perhaps not positive about, and they always give you the side eye. They won't talk. And it taught me a valuable lesson to just keep on writing the truth, because who cares if you're friends with celebrities? That wasn't my job. My job was to write about celebrities. And it's happened even recently where, a celebrity that used to be so friendly and stuff will suddenly not even notice you as they walk by. That's fine. That means I'm doing my job.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, what did you learn about interviewing?
Oh,
which isn't to say, what am I doing wrong? But,
No,
what did you get better
at? You're doing great. Well, here's a shocking story. My first interview for the Columbia Daily Spectator when I was a celebrity, my first celebrity was Carol Shelley. She was one of the Pigeon Sisters in The Odd Couple. Remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
And she was on Broadway in The Elephant Man. She won a Tony Award. Anyway, I was so nervous about meeting her because I love The Odd Couple so much. that I simply had a printed up, a typed up list of questions. I would ask a question, look at her, she would answer. I would then look down, ask the next question. And I was so nervous and intimidated. And by the end of it, she's just said to me, "What do you plan to do for a career? I hope not journalism." And I was like, "Why?" And she said, "You look like you couldn't wait to go home and play the tape to hear what I said." And I was devastated, mainly because she was right on. That was tough love. She was so truthful. I hadn't been paying attention because I was so nervous, and I didn't have the strength at that point to tell her, "I'm so sorry. I was so intimidated because I'm such a fan, and that's why I'm in a daze right now." I just kind of stumbled out wanting to cry and yet learning a valuable lesson. And what I learned is you have to, first of all, only interview people you love, really do your research so that you're asking them not obvious questions they get all the time, and really treat it like a conversation. Get something human out of them, something spontaneous.
Yeah. Are there still people you feel like you would, I don't want to say be overwhelmed by, but sort of plots around? Or are you at a point where celebrities are not just people, sometimes they're less than people in certain respects?
Well, I've met so many of my icons. Diana Ross was my ultimate icon. That's why I had a cover band. And I was at a party for her on the Intrepid, and she actually came up to me and said, "Hello, I'm Diana Ross." And I was like, "I know." I was on Oprah's show when she was local in Chicago. I've met Carol Burnett. I'm talking old school icons here. The one I never met, who I mentioned before, is Meryl Streep, and I've been in the room with her and never had the nerve to go up to her because I don't want to insult her by just going, "Hi, I love your work." Gee, I wonder if Meryl Streep's ever heard that before.
I find your work has meant a lot to me over the years. Is a good icebreaker without being "I'm your biggest fan," which we know can make them really uncomfortable. But yeah, you got to pick your spots.
I never know if they want to hear about a specific thing, don't go up to Mary Tyler Moore and say, "I love the Mary Tyler Moore Show," or "I loved Ordinary People." Tell her you loved her in Thoroughly Modern Millie,
Yeah, I go for the most obscure thing possible that I enjoyed of a person because, they never hear about that.
But then again, when I did meet Mary, I told her about my favorite episode, and I said it wasn't really the Chuckles the Clown. It was the one where Ted had a mild heart attack and realized you have to appreciate life, and everyone made fun of him, but then they felt they should appreciate life. But by that point, Ted was over the feeling. You remember that episode?
Yeah.
And Mary, just sort of the way you are right now, Mary kind of glazed over. I thought she would go, "Oh, what a wonderful," She just was like, "Oh, yeah, that's nice." And when I met Cloris Leachman, I told her, I love the episode where your brother turns out to be gay, because that episode really changed my life.
Yeah.
It's like Phyllis's brother comes to town. Phyllis wants him to hook up with Mary. Mary's busy, so he hooks up with Rhoda. And Phyllis is horrified because she thinks Rhoda is really a vulgarian. And Phyllis ends up saying, "I know Rhoda's going to marry my brother." And Rhoda says, "Phyllis, I'm not going to marry your brother." And Phyllis says, "Why? He's handsome, he's charming, he's successful." And Rhoda goes, "Phyllis, he's gay." And that hit me like a bombshell because it was just tossed out that this handsome, successful guy could be gay and you could even talk about it. And then Phyllis goes, "Thank God," because it meant that he wasn't going to marry Rhoda. So it was pro-gay, even if it's for the wrong reason. Yeah. And when I told Cloris that, she glazed over. And here's another thing I've learned. Don't talk about yourself. I once talked to one of the Manhattan Transfer, the vocal group.
Yeah.
And I was going on and on to her about how I had a cover band and I love Motown music. And she was nice, like, "Oh, that's nice." But she really didn't want to hear it.
Yeah. I can imagine. There's, celebrity, and then there's the journalist. But something that I'm curious about, because I outside the culture, I don't know how it's taken one way or the other. Outing people in your work over the 90s, or from 80s, 90s, and beyond, and accidentally outing someone, like when you thought it was public knowledge, but it turns out people really didn't know. Was that ever a thing you ran into? Making an off-the-cuff reference that people were just, "Hey, we don't talk about that with this celebrity"?
Oh, it wasn't really accidental, but
did accidental ever occur, or was it always
No.
Yeah.
Not accidental, but like Nathan Lane went to a gay bar, so I wrote about it, and he wasn't happy.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're a celebrity and you went to a gay bar, and then we became friends. Rosie O'Donnell, and I would always say, just come out, come out. We know you don't have a crush on Tom Cruise. That's baloney. She was mad. She called me and Michelangelo Signorelli, who's the king of outing, gay Nazis on Larry King. But now we're friends, and she actually gave a speech, a beautiful speech, at a roast of me 3 years ago. Ellen DeGeneres was making out with Anne Heche literally at a lesbian bar in New York. So it wasn't a big stretch for me to say she's a lesbian. They're both lesbians. They're having a lesbian relationship. And again, Anne thanked me. Ellen got on the phone. It's all nicey nice. I felt I was just telling the truth about people. If you're going to write about celebrities, why say that homosexuality or bisexuality is the last taboo? Why make that unspoken?
Hmm. And do you see it still carry over on the movie side of things? Like most everyone this comes up with, it tends not to be movie stars, TV figures, other cultural figures, but for some reason they're always, or maybe I'm behind the times. It seems that, big figures in the movies tend not to, tend to still be in the closet, I guess.
Well, there are so many out celebrities now. It's partly the world that I dreamed about and maybe helped in a little way to create, that it's not that big. There isn't that urgency. Like, you have to come out. Back then, there was an urgency, especially with AIDS mounting at that point. Now people come out. It's like, that's nice. But yeah, you're right. It's not that easy still to get a major film career. Some people have done it. Hollywood is weirdly hypocritical in that we'll give awards to straight people for playing LGBTQ. How wonderfully brave. But we're afraid that people won't believe a gay actor as a straight character. And that's just baloney. Right. Acting is acting.
Yeah, that's one that's always kind of perplexed me. And again, we'll see it the reverse way in TV, but never in the movies. Again, there's a reason I'm just some schlub in New Jersey doing a podcast. But the one question I was sort of curious about, I saw the Fran Leibowitz documentary years ago on HBO, the one that Scorsese did with him did with her, and she brings up the concept of, as you were talking about, that sort of mentoring with gay culture over between generations, and the way AIDS sort of short-circuited that, at least in terms of cultural mentoring. The way older gay men would be able to opera, ballet, et cetera, to younger men and sort of bring them up into those cultural worlds. Do you see that holding up? Am I mischaracterizing it incredibly? Do you see any sort of disjunction, I guess, from the AIDS era in terms of younger generations having the same cultural interests that older gay men did?
So many of the gay men that died of AIDS were in their 30s. It was shocking. And they were at the peak of their talents. And we lost so many different people like Michael Bennett and Willie Smith, choreographers, directors, designers. So that robbed the gay culture of so much. But Harvey Fierstein always said, and I disagree with him at the time, but now I've come around to it, that AIDS made the world notice gays. It actually put a spotlight on us. Also, a culture arose from it. Angels in America, a 2-part show by Tony Kushner, is one of the greatest dramas ever written. And it's all about the damage of the closet and deception, and Roy Cohn, who, of course, was Donald Trump's mentor. So, yeah, nothing can replace the culture that has been robbed by AIDS. But at the same time, I was writing about the nightlife and the gay performance scene, and then going to ACT UP rallies during the day, because I wanted to also show that it's not over. It can't extinguish us. There's still a lot of life. Some of us are in denial. Some of us are wrongly celebrating life itself, but there is still life itself. And jump ahead, same situation. There's so many parallels.
Yeah. Did you feel any sense of I'd say, survivor's guilt or survivor's remorse? Just
yes.
not. Okay, go on. Yeah.
I mean, I felt not only survivor's guilt, but the need to live for everyone that couldn't live. And I already am the kind of person who is obsessive back in high school, I had to be in every activity because I just wanted to be loved by somebody. So I would be working for the school paper, the yearbook, and the school show, directing the senior play, in the honor society, on the math team, on and on and on. Same thing happened in college. And then post-college, we follow all the same patterns. And so I'm writing about theater. I'm writing about nightlife. I have a band, writing about politics. So for me to then say I also have to live for everyone that died of AIDS is like I'm putting a lot on my plate. But I found that I slept less and less as I scrambled to live and live and live and try to create as much as possible.
Any sense of what you would tell younger Michael Musto? Maybe college age Michael? Is that someone you look back at and yeah?
I would say, first of all, people tell me don't follow journalism, you'll never make it. Ignore those people. Secondly, realize how many chapters life is going to give you. I actually thought I was washed up and over at 29 when I got the column at The Voice.
Yeah.
That was a whole new chapter. And then when I got on TV, that started a whole other chapter. For years, I never had to pitch myself. Everything came my way. I ended up writing for The Times and Vanity Fair. I was on every TV channel. To this day, when I thought I was washed up again, I just shot stuff for Showtime, FX Channel, and ABC, and I'm writing all over the place. So just have confidence in yourself and your talent. Be self-promoting. People don't knock on your door. You have to get the word out there.
Yeah.
Not to the point where they're going to get a restraining order, but, promote yourself and your work, find your voice, write as much as you can to find your voice, and just do it. Just go there.
Mm-hmm. And I guess a sensitive question, but I don't recall coming across it in reading your stuff in the past. Your folks, were
they have passed, yeah.
Okay. Well, I just, and this will sound horrendously crass, more freaked out by your being gay or your being a journalist? Was one was one more disappointing?
They were horrified by both. Well, growing up, I had a subscription to New York Magazine, and one day I looked at it, and it was a cover story on gay people, and my father had written on it in pen, a bunch of sick perverts who should be exterminated. Hmm. So that didn't bode too well for me, did it?
Right. Yeah.
My mother was deeply religious. However, you know what? I never sat them down and gave them the talk, but I brought people to the house to visit for holidays, all kinds of LGBTQs. I brought them to all the nightlife parties that I was having, and they loved the people. And it's like that movie Green Book. Like once you meet the person you're afraid of, you realize they're human. Yeah. My father ended up dancing with Amanda Lepore, the famed transgender diva. Wow. And you know what? They never said another word about me being gay. My mother even blurted that she wished the best for gay people, which was her coded way of saying she loved me and didn't. I'm going to start crying. That was okay, more than okay with me being gay. The journalism thing worried them because they thought you can't make a living. My mother, even when I was doing really well, said, can't you get a side job like at a grocery store packing groceries? And I'm like, I'm writing cover stories for Us Magazine. Why would I pack groceries on the side? I don't need the money. And it would be a bit demeaning. No offense to anyone who does that. It's an honest living, but I didn't need to do that. But I thought that was cute. That came out of concern. The homophobia wasn't cute, but I brought them around without even saying a word. Yeah. However, I do recommend people actually talk to your parents. It's just I think from kind of nonverbal upbringing. People can never understand. I had a rare Italian-American family where, first of all, I was the only child. And secondly, there was no conversation. My parents didn't talk to each other or to me. They loved me. They took care of me, but it wasn't a verbal household. So I never learned to kind of sit them down and address things. I thought nothing could benefit from it, but I welcomed them into my world, and they came around and were wonderfully supportive.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever think of a memoir? I know you said at the beginning you don't look back, but is it something you've ever thought about writing?
I guess so, but I feel like I've written 4 books and I've written so many columns. Like if you just staple them all together, that's a memoir.
That's the other question. Do the columns, constitute a chronicle of you? They
do, because it's a first person diary. It doesn't tell everything that's going on in my life, but it tells my reactions, my state of mind, and I would write a memoir if people really wanted it. That could be my last thing before I just keel over.
And I guess it would make more sense. Who would you want playing you in the biopic in that respect?
Well, having seen the recent photos, I'd have to say Chris Evans.
I haven't checked out the pictures yet. I've heard, but
Well, yeah, he would be the best one to play me. We're
nice.
dead ringers.
Yeah. Okay. Although keeping in mind, or keeping in spirit with a couple of the columns I was referring to at the top of this, have you ever felt like you were fitting in, that you were actually in the right place, that that you fit in, frankly, or has your career been contingent on the need to feel a little bit out of place, and that's what gives you what to write about?
I've always been the outsider. Growing up, like in the schoolyard, you would stand there and they would choose who's going to be in what team. Not only would I be the last one chosen, they would just choose everyone up to me and then just walk away.
Just start the game.
And somebody would say, like, what about him? And they go, all right, we'll take him. In the school plays, I always was going to get the lead, and then I would kind of sabotage it and get the second lead. So I was never quite the main attraction of anything. I was always kind of like a theater critic who wasn't going to be Ben Brantley, or you know what I mean? When I was writing about nightlife, Steven Sabin was the big nightlife writer with Details, and he was a dear friend. So I learned to fetishize what was good about that I was never going to sell out to any one arena. I was always going to be the fly on the wall, and that's how I've gotten my best copy. And then it turns out, it's a wonderful life. I look back and I really do fit in. There are a lot of people that respect what I've done. And I somehow made a place for myself in the world, even though I was definitely a square peg.
Yeah, I wonder if being respected for your work would actually be more damaging than just being alienated. But,
Yeah, well, you never respect by the people you trash. But even within the gay community, I still don't fit in, because there are different types. Like there are twinks who are really cute, and there are muscle queens, and I hate the gym. I hate pain. I'm not fat enough to be a bear, almost. So what kind of gay am I? I don't know. But again, it's good because I can criticize the community.
Yeah, I remember I used to do small press publishing back in like 2000, and I don't know if you know Samuel Delaney, science fiction writer, critic, incredibly gay, Times Square, New York, 70s and 80s theater. Well, Times Square porn theater, sort of gay. And there was just a sense of, wow, I really didn't understand how many varieties of this world exist. Like until I started reading Delaney's work in depth, I'm like, yeah, it's a lot more nuanced and a lot more decadent than anything a white kid in the suburbs was ever going to conceive of or imagine. But, variety, spice of life, I guess.
It's not the way you see it on TV. It's not everyone. It's not Neil Patrick Harris, and I love him, but it's all types, all fetishes. Lesbians are also like snowflakes. They're all different.
Yeah.
And there really are bisexuals out there too. And that's something I had to kind of enlighten myself about, because too many people who had told me they were bisexual were really gay and didn't want to come out and say it. But I had to come out and say, which I already knew, that there were many, many actual bisexuals. And too often they were given short shrift and made invisible by our own community.
Yeah. Do you run that risk of, I hate using the cancel culture thing, but like, having old comments of yours thrown out like that to, therefore we can trust nothing that Michael ever says, or you pretty much, that's what I wrote. I changed my mind over time, etc.
Yeah, I think we have to allow for people to evolve. Somebody may have dressed like a Native American for Halloween when they were 9 years old. Does that mean you're never going to buy their books again? But in the case of like a J.K. Rowling who made these transphobic tweets and has doubled down on them, she really has a chance now to redeem herself and enlighten herself, and she's not going there. The cancel culture is not saying she should be arrested, killed, she should never write a book again. We're not saying that. We're just holding her accountable for the things she said. Kevin Hart made really dumb jokes he never appropriately apologized for. And we never said he should be totally eliminated. The term cancel culture is not really accurate.
Right.
He ended up losing the Oscar host gig because he wouldn't apologize properly. Again, because his first apology was weak. And then he did the Ellen show, and again, it was a little weak. But I'm all for second chances. I'm one of those people who, if somebody has harmed me emotionally and they apologize, 9 times out of 10, I melt and just I'm putty in your hands. Thank you for being big enough to realize what you did was wrong and you've apologized. But now we read this lame litany of celebrity apologies, like Leah Michele saying she's sorry for how her behavior was perceived.
Yeah. I'm sorry if someone was offended, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that whole thing. It's like, no. It wasn't just perceived, and somebody was definitely offended.
Yeah.
And I always tell celebrities, just do a blanket apology, not a half-hearted one. Just clear the slate. Then you could do your Saturday Night Live sketch where you make fun of the whole thing, and then you're on the road to redemption.
You know, it's funny when there's a template out there like that, and they nonetheless go with, how can I half-ass this, in as many ways as possible. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I guess we see it from the outside that, well, clearly you should do this, but when you're on the inside of it and your PR people are telling you something that's,
Yeah. Well, the problem I've found when I've been called out for different comments is they don't even explain what they're mad about sometimes. You just get these screaming tweets, and it's like, well, which offensive thing that I said are you referring to? And why are you mad? And how is screaming in capital letters going to change anything? Why don't you educate me? Yeah. And that's what we should do with celebrities that go awry.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Now, something I want to ask, going back to your college education, you went to Columbia, you said, in the, well, we won't put years on it because...
The 70s, yes.
Okay. I think they were doing like the whole Western civilization core curriculum thing back then. You write about theater, you cover, the arts world. I never read too much about your reading habits. Do you have a lot? See, I know I put people on the spot when I ask them what they read or who they're reading, but do you have well, what do you read? I guess.
Well, and I went to New Utrecht High School in Brooklyn, and it was pretty poppy. We actually, in literature class, read Simon and Garfunkel lyrics as poetry. We would analyze that as poetry. By the time I got to Columbia, even before I got there, they sent us a reading list that you had to have read the Iliad, the Odyssey, et cetera, Aristophanes, Socrates. My head was spinning, and I loved it. And did so much reading while I was at Columbia because I had to major in English Lit. They didn't have a journalism undergrad major. And I have to admit that ever since then, in addition to reading the news and being very up to date, as well as celebrity stuff, I have mainly read celebrity memoirs. I love a celebrity memoir. And I always skip the first 100 pages. I just want to get to when they became famous.
Yeah.
But I went to the Strand bookstore yesterday, which is a discount store, and everywhere you turn were books about Trump. There was Michael Cohen, there was Mary Trump's book, there was Bob Woodward's book, Rage, there's the book about Melania, and that is keeping the book industry afloat. So thank you, Donald Trump, for being a horrible monster.
What makes for a good celebrity memoir? Because I recorded with Margot Mifflin, who just did a history of the Miss America pageant, and she read, as she put it, dozens of Miss America memoirs, and it wears on you after a while. But when it comes to a celebrity memoir, what makes it good? What do you enjoy the most?
Much as I love Judi Dench, she wrote one that was just kind of nicey nice. It was all nice little tea cozy kind of stories. And I was like, God, is this boring? Goldie Hawn I adore, but she wrote one that was just scattered, unchronological thoughts. Just like, oh, I just remembered in 1972 this happened. It was like, I prefer a chronological story. I like honesty also. Rosalind Russell, the great movie star, wrote one that was not honest because she insisted in the book that she did all her singing in the movie Gypsy. And in reality, if you watch the movie Gypsy, which I've done several thousand times because I'm an old school gay. You hear her voice changing. You can hear where they dubbed somebody else, which was actually Lisa Kirk. My favorite celebrity memoir was something called I'm Not Ashamed by a B actress named Barbara Payton, who had stardom on her plate and then turned to drugs and actually turned tricks. But then I found out it was ghostwritten by somebody who lies a lot. He had written Hedy Lamarr's book, which is kind of fictionalized. So it's hard to say. These celebrity memoirs come with a lot of agendas. But I like a good, juicy read.
Yeah. See, that's why I'm convinced. You got to take the plunge. You've got all this time with the pandemic and everything. You know?
That's the thing. I wasted the last 7 months when I could have been writing a memoir.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of times I'll read a memoir and I'm thinking of the other person's. Like, I love Patti LuPone, but a lot of her book was like, I could see the other person's point of view as she's telling about all these confrontations. Madonna's brother, Christopher, also wrote a book. And I was like, much as I've dissed Madonna, I saw Madonna's side in a lot of his arguments. And a lot of them were petty. Like, when she had her wedding, I got a smaller room in the castle than Gwyneth Paltrow got. And it was like, you know.
Yeah.
You're not going to make me lose sleep over your plight.
I get you. And best gift bag you ever received at an event?
Oh, Marc Jacobs gave a watch, and they were very expensive. A Marc Jacobs watch. I was like, this is my kind of gift bag. I have enough T-shirts. I have enough candles. I have enough facial cleanser. Thank you, Field, by the way, for supplying my entire lifetime of facial cleanser. Thanks to Fashion Week gift bags. But a Marc Jacobs watch, that was special, and I couldn't wait to regift it. I just used the Timex.
I somehow knew you were going to have a definitive answer to that question instantly. Anything else you might have hemmed and hawed about, the gift bag, you would know in a heartbeat.
That's it. That's my topic. And I do miss gift bags. I miss just seeing things. I'm now watching New York Film Festival movies online. It's all digital. And also, there was a press conference with Steve McQueen, the director and the stars of his film, online, and it was great. Their faces were nice and big on my screen, but I am missing the up close and personal approach, and I'm missing the gift bags.
Yeah, understood. Have you figured out your best Zoom angle yet, or does that not exist in terms of?
Well, this is sad. After 7 months of Zoom, I just realized you're supposed to look at the green light. That's the camera. I'm always looking at myself, which makes it look like you're looking down and maybe sleeping sometimes.
Yeah, I had to move my little window like right next to the camera. So because egotistical monster that I am, I'm always looking over at my face. So this way, at least it's close enough to the camera that, it works.
And I've done so many Zoom things where I'm not even in frame and nobody told me. Why didn't anybody say something? I finally now know how to frame myself, and it's too late.
And do you see any aspects of things you've picked up on or parts of pandemic life that you can carry into whenever we're past all this? Or is it pretty much you just want to get all of this behind you and there isn't a whole lot to have learned through it?
Well, for me, one of the better things is I've long had a movie club where we watch good, bad movies like Airport 75 or the all-star musical version of Lost Horizon written by Larry Kramer. And we used to do it maybe every 2 weeks. Then it became like every 6 weeks because everybody was busy and traveling. Well, for the last 7 months, we've done it twice a week on Zoom. And we've even added extra guest stars. Anybody can join. It's unlimited.
Nice.
And I simply, share screen, go to YouTube or whatever, click on the movie, and everybody watches it. And you can comment all through it. You can make chat comments or text. And it's been a very pleasurable escapism for all of us. And I think we're going to stay that way. We're never going to do it back at my house again because it's so much easier this way.
Yeah, that's been one thing. Under normal circumstances, I always did these in person. And obviously, that's not going to happen for quite a while. So I'm figuring after all this, maybe I'll balance a couple of remote podcasts with the in-person stuff. But
yeah.
But
I've done a few, like I mentioned, a few TV tapings. Basically, I'm in a room by myself, and which is all sprayed down. They've taken my temperature 18 times, and the questions come in via a monitor. Somebody is talking, and I'm seeing them on a monitor. So basically, I've gone to the studio. I barely am in contact with any other human, and it's very dispiriting, but it's the way it has to be. And we're managing to start doing things again like that. It feels good. It feels. I went with friends to the Metropolitan Museum, which reopened recently at 25% capacity, and it just felt human again. I felt like a New Yorker again.
Nice. I can't wait for that to Well, yeah. I mean, I live 25 miles away. I could see New York every time I drive out of my town. We have this giant hill you go over and you could see all the New York skyline. And I just keep thinking someday I will be back in there. I'll be
Yes,
able
you
to
will.
visit. But yeah, for now, I will hide out
Well, I
here
will
with
tell you,
the,
I always like dining outside in nice weather.
yeah.
So this summer we've done that nonstop because restaurants that formerly were not allowed to have outdoor dining were now allowed to do so. So there's been this weird dichotomy where everything's depressing and pathetic, and everyone's unemployed. But you walk through Little Italy or the Village or Soho, and there are tons of people dancing and drinking and having a great time on the street. And I've taken advantage of that. And now September 30th is when they're going to start with the indoor dining in New York at 25 capacity.
You feel comfortable with that?
I'm not
Do you feel like,
sure.
would you go in? Would you sit down for a meal in a restaurant?
I'm going to let my friends be the guinea pigs. And if they survive, how's that for a nice person? If they survive, then I'm going to take a chance like in December.
Oh, I've got some friends. I'm in a running group, and 2 weeks ago, a bunch of them all ran in a 5K, and I told them, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'm going to wait. No, I'll see if anything incubates and any of you get infected. I will be the one guy laughing, but so far they've been safe. So, that's I guess what we have
That's
to
how
do.
it's been. Like anytime, like months ago when we didn't know how you could really get it, I had a piece of lettuce on a sandwich, and I thought, who's touched this lettuce? I now have 5 to 14 days to wait out this lettuce and see if it's going to kill me. That's how crazy it's been. And of course, I do know people who have been lost, including
Yeah.
Terrence McNally, Nick Cordero, my aunt, who was the only nice nun I ever met.
Yeah.
She was a great influence on me because she was actually verbal, and that was rare in my family.
Yeah. Yeah. Who do you, it's a weird question to ask. Who do you miss? I'll ask, who do you miss among the living? Like, who do you just want to sit down and hang out with? Because that way it's not too morose, a morbid a question.
Well, a few of my friends have moved out of town. My friend Cathay Che, who is a social worker, moved to LA with her husband. My friend Kenyon, who's a rock performer, moved to a big house upstate because he and his wife have a baby. It's a transitional time. We lost people to AIDS. And after 9/11, we lost people who couldn't take New York anymore. I'm never going to leave New York. Let's face it. I fantasize it if Trump wins again. I would love to just go to New Zealand. But I know that deep down, I'm just going to stay here. I can't drive. I'm made for New York, and I've been through so many changes. If it's now going back to the 1970s version of Manhattan, fine. I've already experienced it. I know it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I'm with you. Michael, I want to thank you so much for the hour. This has really been a fun conversation, and my hope is, we'll actually get together in person someday. Not that I'm going to impose or anything or stalk outside of your apartment, but thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Gil, for having me. I really appreciate it. Take care.
And that was Michael Musto. He does not have a website, and his writing appears in a couple different places. So the best way to follow him is via Twitter at Mikey Musto, which is MikeyMusto. You should also check out his books, Downtown, Manhattan on the Rocks, La Dolce Musto, and Fork on the Left, Knife in the Back. They're fantastic, and I'm awfully happy to have him as the guest for this 400th episode of the show. And I'm awfully glad to have you guys listening all this time. Now, in the before time, this is when I would mention my Patreon and PayPal and hit you guys up for money, but I don't want your money. I'm doing fine with my day job. The only support I look for is emails, letters, postcards, whatever, to tell me what I'm doing right and wrong and what you like about the show or dislike. What you can do, if you have any money to spare, is help other people, whether it's individuals through their Patreons, GoFundMes, Kickstarters, Indiegogos, or institutions like food banks, freedom funds, etc. There are a lot of people and places in need right now, so if you're in a position to help, then I hope you will. Now, the only other thing I have to tell you is that I still have a few dozen copies of my very first issue of my very first zine, Haiku for Business Travelers, left. It's free. If you want one, just drop me a line or visit haikuforbusinesstravelers.com and you can hit me up that way. Like I say, it's free. You can toss in a few bucks for postage and production if you want, but this isn't about money. This is just about my sharing my art, such as it is. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.